In 5 years, we published 6 issues. That's the way it was then. Magazines only lasted as long as their editors' enthusiasm and finances lasted. And they could be very eccentric. There was one that was, every page was a linoleum cut. Believe it or not, it was called Thumb. So it was a very lively time, and this new December, or this extension, is a terrific magazine. It has a wide variety of material. It also has, if you've seen the new issue, you know, or you will know that there's usually an introductory essay by Gianna, and there's also one by Buzz, and they're very eloquent. Not what you get from most introductions by editors of magazines or art directors. They're quite eloquent, quite precise, and quite moving. Well, enough of that. Oh, there's a pen here. Anybody want to write anything? There it is. First poem I ever published now, in December was in volume 7 in 1965, but I can tell from it that it must have been written 2 years earlier because it's probably a birthday poem. You'll see why. I was just about to go in the Army, and I had also changed my way of writing. I didn't know anything about writing when I started writing, and nothing at all, believe me. And so there was a day when I woke up and I thought, no, I'm doing this all wrong. And so I started all over with very simple language, as you'll see. It was called the alphabet. It was in 3 parts. People are saying the marks are upon us. We know each other by looks. We have all come from affliction. We have come by way of crying. We have all come from laughing too much. People are saying people manage, people who manage to say so. People are saying, how old are you? If you speak in your own voice, they will hear you. If they hear you, you will be encouraged. I believe in being encouraged. Proper names, such a good idea. Any one might be a credit to letters. Ahead of me a road stretches like all the others. I have ideas for an alphabet. 26, over and over. So I suspect I wrote that 2 years earlier when I was 26. I recently came across the first poem I'd ever published. I saw something on I didn't start writing poetry until after college, but while I was in college I saw something on a bulletin board. A magazine called Presidio they wanted poems and were going to pay for them? Wow. So I went into the newspaper office and I wrote a poem. And I didn't want them to know it was my first poem. So I called it Ontology Part 2. And I knew it was horrible, but we recently came across it, and it doesn't rise to the level of horrible. They published it. And it had lots of typos when it came out, but it didn't make any difference. The whole thing was obscure anyway. Well, another thing that Gianna has done is create a community. She's creating and constantly creating a community of writers. I think I did a lot of other arts at times, but I think I always started up in them because of the kind of people who did it. I wanted to know them and, to kind of be a fly on the wall. This is called Jane Was With Me, and Jane is a poet, Jane Cooper, the late Jane Cooper, the wonderful poet of New York City, came out to Iowa City where we lived to teach a course and teach a semester. And she didn't drive, didn't have a car with her either, of course, and so Dorothy and I would give her rides to parties and what have you. This was something based on giving her a ride. This is called Jane Was With Me. Jane was with me the day the rain dropped a squirrel like that. An upside-down embrace, a conical explosion from the sky, a thick flowering of sudden water. Whatever it was, the way it happened is that first the trees grew a little, and then they played music and breathed songs and applauded themselves, and that made the squirrel surrender to nothing but the beauty of a wet tree, about to shake its upper body like a devil. And of course, he went out on that tree just as far as he could, when things were not so beautiful. And that was it. Hard onto the roof of our car, before he could set his toes. The flat whack of the body. He lay in the street breathing and bleeding until I could get back, and then he looked me in the eye, exactly. Pasted to the concrete by his guts, he couldn't lift or leave or live. And so I brought the car and put its right tire across his head. If in between the life part and the death part, there was another part, the time of near death, we have come to know its length and its look, exactly, in this life always near death. But there's something else. Jane was with me. After the rain, the trees were prettier yet. And if I were a small animal with a wide tail, I would trust them too, especially if Jane were with me. Gianna has made room for all kinds of prose, all kinds of poetry. One of the things she made room for in her revival issue was one of these poems of mine that have come to be known as the Dead Man poems. There's an old Zen admonition: live as if you were already dead. You know, participate, take part in everything, but have a long view too. The Dead Man of the Dead Man poems is alive and dead at the same time, so you don't have to feel morose. This one is called Uprising. It says the Book of the Dead Man, in parentheses it says Uprising, then it says live as if you were already dead. And here comes part one. There are two parts. These poems are a little strange in certain ways, and one of the ways in which they're strange is that the poetry line, every line of the poem is a sentence, a complete sentence. So the line is a sentence, the sentence is the line, but the sentence is elastic. It can be very short, very long, or anything else. So here we go. About the Dead Men and the Uprising is part one. Here we go. From camps deep in the woods, a signal, scratchy, intermittent. From a notch in a cave wall, the tricks from wind, a scrawny whistle. From a specimen of the past, expunging of trapped stink. The smallest stirring has weight to those who live beneath or apart, hidden or overlooked, flattened by events, semi-conscious after work. Now the electorate, heretofore muted, puny and frail, cocks its ears. You want details? Here are details. The dead man was among the young people who took to the street. Dead men and dead women went alongside in multitudinous numbers. They wore t-shirts and jalabas, turbans and baseball caps, leather jackets and yarmulkes. They colored the walls of gray buildings as they marched. And part two is simply called More About the Dead Man and the Uprising. There was a moment before the pot boiled. A little simmering was all. The surface was barely stirred. The tide rolled in and out. The dead man saw the officials waiting it out in good eateries. "Pardon me," said the dead man, not without irony. "Pardon my hand up from the grave. Pardon my detached legs on the move." The dead man lay among those who had been dispatched. Something moved. The earth's crust cracked. It was a crowd route-stepping in the street. The dead man thinks you'll get yours, guilty and innocent alike. The dead man, like you, is at fault. While it happens, his blameless half sings and dances of mournful pleasures and mindless joy. For the songs of fate are playful, mischievous, genial, and victorious. Today's the anniversary of my father's death in 1959 at the age of 54. He was an immigrant from Ukraine, came over as a teenager, and I began writing poetry sometime after he had passed away. So naturally there were father poems. Every so often there'd be another one. I think, oh, maybe this was the last one. But in fact, the one I'm going to read to you is the last one, and you'll see that it has to be. It's called Ending with a Line from Lear. The line the poem ends with is the line that the old king says in Shakespeare's play over the body of his daughter Cordelia. This is ending with a line from Lear. I will try to remember. It was light. It was also dark in the grave. I could feel how dark it was, how black it would be without my father when he was gone. But he was not gone, not yet. He was only a corpse, and I could still touch him that afternoon, earlier the same afternoon. This is the one thing that scares me, losing my father. I don't want him to go. I'm a young man. I will never be older. I'm wearing a tie and a watch. The sky, gray, hangs over everything. Today, the sky has no curve to it and no end. He is deep into his mission. He has business to attend to. He wears a tie but no watch. I will skip a lot of what happens next. Then the moment comes. Everything has been said, and the wheels start to turn. They roll, the straps unwind, and the coffin begins to descend into the awful damp, into the black center of the earth. I am being left behind. The center of my body sinks down into the cold fire of the grave. But still my feet stand on top of the dirt. My father's grave. I will never again. Never, 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 never. That's what Lear says over the body of his daughter, Cordelia. Never, never. This poem is set in Afghanistan in 2002. It's part of a book called Mars Being Red, which is a wartime book. That doesn't mean every poem in the book is on the battlefield or anything like that. It just means that the war was going on then. There's a matrix behind every event. The event in this poem was later made into what became the primary event in a film called Taxi to the Dark Side. Yeah. This is called Bagram, Afghanistan, 2002. The interrogation celebrated spikes and cuffs, the inky blue that invades a blackened eye, the eyeball that bulges like a radish, that incarnadine only blood can create. They asked the young taxi driver questions he could not answer, and they beat his legs until he could no longer kneel on their command. They chained him by the wrist to the ceiling. They may have admired the human form then, stretched out, for the soldiers were also athletes, trained to shout in unison and be buddies. By the time his legs had stiffened, a blood clot was already tracing a vein into his heart. They said he was dead when they cut him down, but he was dead the day they arrested him. Are they feeding the prisoners gravel now, to make them skillful orators as they confess? Here stands Demosthenes in the military court, unable to form the words, "My country, what shall we do? We who are at war but are asked to pretend we are not. Do we need another naive apologist to crown us with cliches that would turn the grass brown above a grave?" They called the carcass Mr. Dilawar. They believed he was innocent. Their orders were to step on the necks of the prisoners, to break their will, to make them say something in a sleep-deprived delirium of fractures, rising to the occasion, or, like Mr. Dilawar, leaving his few possessions and his body. I'm going to end with the two poems I always read at every reading. The first poem is to my wife. It's called To Dorothy. You are not beautiful exactly. You are beautiful inexactly. You let a weed grow by the mulberry, and the mulberry grow by the house. So close, in the personal quiet of a windy night, it brushes the wall and sweeps away the day till we sleep. A child said it, and it seemed true. Things that are lost are all equal. But it isn't true. If I lost you, the air wouldn't move, nor the tree grow. Someone would pull the weed, my flower, but quiet wouldn't be yours. If I lost you, I'd have to ask the grass to let me sleep. And finally, and thanks for your patience, I wish I could think of the perfect words to tell you how the incredible job Gianna has done in creating this magazine. But you'll know that when you read it. Yes, you will. I'm sorry. Dorothy says I don't laugh, I only giggle. Apparently. Okay, thanks for your patience. Oh, I should remind you that the two poets are going to join me up here, and we're going to answer questions. We each have one answer. No. It'll be fun. Okay, here we go. This is my poem after Carlos Drummond de Andrade. He had a great Brazilian poet, writing in Portuguese, of course. He had passed away. I wanted to pay homage to him, so I went looking in his work for some little thing I could use as an epigraph below a poem. And what I found, his name was Carlos Drummond de Andrade, I found a three-word sentence. It's life, Carlos. So this is my poem. It's called Poem After Carlos Drummond de Andrade, but most people who know it say they call it the life poem. And then it says, it's life, Carlos. Here we go. It's life that is hard. Waking, sleeping, eating, loving, working, and dying are easy. It's life that suddenly fills both ears with the sound of that symphony that forces your pulse to race and slows your heart near to bursting. It's life, not listening, that stretches your neck and opens your eyes and brings you into the worst weather of the winter to arrive once more at the house where love seemed to be in the air. And it's life, just life, that makes you breathe deeply, in the air that is filled with wood smoke and the dust of the factory because you hurried and now your lungs heave and fall with the nervous excitement of a leaf in spring breezes, though it is winter and you are swallowing the dirt of the town. It isn't death when you suffer, It isn't death when you miss each other and hurt for it. When you complain, that isn't death. When you fight with those you love, when you misunderstand, when one line in a letter or one remark in person ties one of you in knots, when the end seems near, when you think you will die, when you wish you were already dead, none of that is death. It's life, after all, that brings you a pain in the foot and a pain in the hand, a sore throat, a broken heart, a cracked back, a torn gut, a hole in your abdomen, an irritated stomach, a swollen gland, a growth, a fever, a cough, a hiccup, a sneeze, a bursting blood vessel in the temple. It's life, not nerve ends, that puts the heartache on a pedestal and worships it. It's life, and you can't escape it. It's life, and you asked for it. It's life, and you won't be consumed by passion. You won't be destroyed by self-destruction. You won't avoid it by abstinence. You won't manage it by moderation, because it's life. Life everywhere. Life at all times. And so you won't be consumed by passion. You will be consumed by life. It's life that will consume you in the end. But in the meantime, it's life that will eat you alive. But for now, it's life that calls you to the street where the wood smoke hangs and the bare hint of a whisper of your name. But before you go, too late. Life got its tentacles around you, its hooks into your heart, and suddenly you come awake as if for the first time, and you are standing in a part of the town where the air is sweet, your face flushed, your chest thumping, your stomach a planet, your heart a planet, your every organ a separate planet, all of it of a piece, though the pieces turn separately. Oh, silent indications of the inevitable, as among the natural restraints of winter and good sense, life blows you apart in her arms. Thanks.